With a plethora of unique characters and its vast world building, Tower of God is undoubtedly a very complex story. With new chapters coming out weekly, and with hiatuses mixed in, it can be difficult to remember and organize the timeline of the entire story. So in this video, I attempt to summarize the entire story of Season 0 and Season 1 of Tower of God. The story begins with a group of adventurers who enter the tower from the outside and begin climbing the vast tower that you know as Tower of God. Their tales and feats while climbing the tower are arguably so great that it would need hundreds of chapters to cover it. But what you need to know is that this group was led by Jihad and was accompanied by 12 other people, two of which named Arlene and V. Upon reaching the 100th floor, everyone except V signed a contract with the administrator of that floor to obtain immortality. Upon reaching the 134th floor, Jihad declares himself king of the tower and separates the key to the 135th floor into two pieces: the legendary weapons known as the 13-month series, and some rings given to the princes of the Red Light District. Jihad proposes his love to Arlene, but is rejected, as Arlene and V are already in a relationship and even eventually have a child together. Arlene and V reject Jihad's rule of the tower, and a war breaks between those against Jihad and those with Jihad. Among those with Jihad are the other 10 companions who are now known as the 10 Great Family Leaders. Arlene and V eventually lose the war and become fugitives. Jihad finds out about the child of Arlene and V, and brutally kills the child in front of Arlene. Arlene becomes traumatized by this event and enters some kind of psychotic and suicidal state, but fails to end her own life due to the immortality contract. Meanwhile, V, overwhelmed by what has happened to Arlene, ends his own life. Arlene preserves the body of the dead child and somehow manages to find a way out of the tower. She offers her child to a god outside the tower and prophesies that the child will someday return and liberate the tower from Jihad. This child is later discovered to be the protagonist of our story, the 25th bomb, or just bomb. Jihad removes Arlene and V from history and establishes a system of regulars for those currently climbing the tower and rankers for those who have reached the 134th floor. At this time, Jihad is ranked number 1. Rankers are given high status and are often seen managing floors and floor advancement tests. Jihad also begins selecting powerful females as princesses of Jihad to serve him. These females get injected with Jihad's power and become extremely powerful. Although Jihad and the 10 Great Family Leaders are technically irregulars, residents of the tower do not consider them as such, as they are the ones that kind of basically own the tower. Sometime during Jihad's ruling, Enryu, a messenger of God outside the tower, breaks into the 43rd floor of the tower, demolishes the floor, and kills the floor administrator, which was thought to be impossible. Enryu calls out Jihad for being a fake king and places something known as the Thorn on the floor, so that Bam can later obtain its power. The 43rd floor becomes inhabitable, and later is known as the Floor of Death, as it is covered in a sea of blood of the floor administrator. Sometime later, an unknown entity named Phantominium suddenly appears in the tower and kills a bunch of important rankers in Jihad's palace, confronts Jihad, and disappears without a trace. Then, a man named Yurek Mizuno enters the tower from the outside in the hopes of tracking down Phantominium. Yurek basically speedruns up the tower and becomes the fastest person to ascend the tower. Currently, however, his goal is to escape the tower, for unknown reasons. The appearance of these 3 irregulars shake up the top of the ranks, putting Phantominium at number 1, Enryu at number 2, King Jihad in number 3, and Yurek in number 4. Finally, from somewhere outside the tower in a dark cave, we meet Arlene's son Bam, and a girl named Rachel who was placed there by an unknown entity to take care of Bam. Rachel gets sick of being stuck in the cave and runs away from Bam and enters the tower. Bam chases after Rachel and enters the tower with her. These are the 5 irregulars we know of so far. The main story of the Tower of God focuses on Bam and his ascent up the tower. Bam wakes up on the first floor of the tower where he meets Hedon, the administrator of that floor. Meanwhile, Yuri, who is both a princess of Jihad and a high ranker, rushes to see Bam after hearing that an irregular has entered the tower. With the help of Yuri's Black March, a weapon of the 13-month series, Bam passes Hedon's test and gets abruptly teleported to the second floor without returning the Black March. Thus, Yuri and her team heads after Bam to retrieve the Black March, which becomes complicated as they are forbidden from entering the testing area. Bam wakes up on the second floor with a group of 400 test participants and is given the first test held by ranker Lee Ro. The first test is to survive until there are 200 participants left. Bam survives the first test with the help of Kun Aguero Agnes, who I will now refer to as just Kun, who is a son of Kun Aduan, who is one of the 10 family leaders. Kun becomes intrigued by Bam's innocence, little to no knowledge of the tower, and his strange affiliation with the Black March. During the second test of the second floor, Bam forms a team with Rak and Kun. With the help of Rak's instincts, Bam's team passes the third test, which involves choosing a random door within a time limit. This test was held by ranker Yu Han Sung, or Coffee Man, who is currently acting as the head of the floor. We also get introduced to many other characters, most notably Hats, Anak, and Shibisu. Meanwhile, in a different area of the first test, held by ranker Quant, we see that only 3 people passed the first test: Rachel, Ghost, and Andrasi, who is also a princess of Jihad. Before Bam's next test, Coffee Man devises a bonus game to group Rachel, Ghost, and Andrasi into Bam's test group. The game is called the Crown Game, a King of the Hill type of game where one person on the team must stay on a throne until the end while wearing a crown. The winning team of the bonus game can pass on to the next floor without having to take any more tests. During the Crown Game, Anak, a princess of Jihad, but actually not Anak because the real Anak was actually assassinated for having a lover, goes on a rampage with her Green April, another weapon of the 13-month series, and solo carries her team. While on a rampage, she notices Bam's Black March and breaks into Bam's safety zone, disqualifying her team from the Crown Game. Anak makes a bet with Bam by waging her Green April for the Black March. The bet is simple: win the Crown Game. Bam is forced to accept the bet as Anak will just kill him for the Black March anyways after the test. Kun and his tactics allow his team to successfully defend their control of the crown. That is, until a masked person, later revealed to be Hwarun, attacks Bam. Rachel, disguised under a hood, and her group also join in to defend Bam's place on the throne. However, Bam notices Rachel and becomes confused. When Bam notices that Rachel is in danger, he leaps off the throne to protect Rachel, injuring Hwarun and himself in the process. As a result, Bam loses the crown game and the bet with Anak. At the end, no one takes the crown, and the game ends without a winning team. Bam becomes unconscious for a couple of days, and Rachel approaches Kun and tells Bam's story and asks him to keep her identity a secret from Bam. After this encounter, Kun begins to see his past self in Bam and becomes motivated to help Bam climb the tower. While Bam is still unconscious, the group gets introduced to positions, since the next test is the position test. The 5 basic positions are the Fisherman, Spearman, Scout, Lightbearer, and Wave Controller. We learn that each position will have a teacher, and the participants will be trained for a month before taking the position test. Kun gets placed into Lightbearer, Rak gets placed into Spearbearer, and Bam gets placed into Wave Controller. Fortunately for Bam, ranker Yuga, the teacher responsible for the Wave Controller group, just coincidentally happens to be late and arrives after Bam wakes up from being unconscious. When Bam wakes up, Kun tells Bam that the hooded girl wasn't actually Rachel, but Bam doesn't buy it. During the training session, Bam shows incredible talent for Shinsu manipulation, and Ho becomes jealous at Bam's talent. Ho becomes manipulated by someone and becomes motivated to kill Rachel during the position test in order to prevent Bam from moving on. However, after being tipped off by Hwarun, Kun finds out about Ho's plan. After training sessions, Bam spends time with the other participants and makes a couple of new friends. The position test is revealed to be a joint test, where the remaining 28 test participants, excluding Rak and Ghost, who passed the position test early, are separated into two teams of 14. Kun is placed in Team A, and Bam is placed in Team B. Each team plays hide and seek, which is not really hide and seek, but basically tag, against a heavily disabled ranker Quant. Each participant will be graded individually and as a team, so it's still possible to pass if one's team loses. Kun takes lead of Team A and creates a genius plan to defeat Quant. However, Kun secretly sabotages his own team and leads his team to a loss in order to increase Bam's rate of passing the position test. In the process, Kun also tricks Quant into protecting Rachel during the next test. Unlike the organized Team A, Team B becomes chaotic as everyone attempts to do their own thing. Endorsi begins to eliminate all remaining fishermen on her team so that she is guaranteed to pass. Bam questions Endorsi's actions, to which she replies, "It is what it is." But then Bam says, No, it isn't," causing Endorsi to develop feelings for Bam. Meanwhile, Ho attempts to kill Rachel, but is caught by Quant and soon after, Bam. Due to Rachel and Ho being in a safe zone where Quant can't enter, Quant isn't able to disable Ho. Thus, after receiving some of Quant's Shinsu, Bam saves Rachel from Ho by mimicking one of Quant's techniques, and Ho commits suicide upon realizing his failure. Finally, Bam and Endorsi work together to outplay Quant and tag him, resulting in Team B's victory. In an isolated area on the second floor, Coffee Man catches Yuga making a secret report. It turns out that Yuga is an assassin working under Jihad and his true name is Lopo Bia Ren. It is revealed that Ren's objective is to kill Anak and retrieve the Green April and the Black March. Coffee Man, seemingly aware of Ren's identity all along, leaves Ren to continue his duty despite it going against the rules of the floor of the test. Bam and Kun pass the position test, but Rachel fails because she was somehow crippled during the position test. Bam, as an irregular, negotiates with the floor administrator and agrees to take the administrator's test to allow Rachel to pass the test. Kun and the other test participants agree to help Bam take the test. The test is called the Submerged Fish Hunt. Basically, while Bam and Rachel float in an air bubble to some objective, Kun and the others must protect these cute little animals. During the test, Anak and Endorsi engage in combat with a dangerous creature called the Bull, which was actually being controlled by Ren. The Bull lures Anak and Endorsi to Ren, and Ren reveals that it was he who actually murdered Anak's mother. Anak and Endorsi team up to fight Ren, but Ren, being a ranker, completely stomps both of them. Just before Anak is executed, Yuri interrupts the battle and wipes the floor with Ren. Due to Ren's affiliation with Jihad, Yuri is unable to directly finish off Ren, and thus calls on her underling to snipe him off.
Hey, this is fucked. This is not right. This is not cool. This is fucking bullshit.
Ren, while taking his last breath, reveals that he is actually not dead, as his real body is somewhere else, and also that he sent the Bull to kill Bam. Yuri takes the Green April and the Black March from Anak, but decides not to hunt after the Bull, having faith that Bam will be able to take care of the Bull by himself. Meanwhile, the Bull attacks Bam and Rachel as they float to their destination. Bam is ultimately able to defeat the Bull by himself and reaches out his hand to Rachel. Rachel, despite apparently being crippled, stands up and pushes Bam off the bubble, knowing that it would lead to his certain death. Finally, after rushing to the exit, Kun and the others only discover Rachel. Thanks to a secret promise Bam made with the administrator, everyone passes the test and Bam is declared dead. Kun and the others honor Bam's death by deciding to help Rachel climb the tower from this point on. Later during the night, Hwarun, for some reason, congratulates Rachel. We flash back to a time just before Bam enters the tower, and discover that Rachel didn't open the door to the tower, but rather Bam did, and Rachel merely followed him in. Rachel was not chosen to enter the tower. However, Hedon proposed a deal to Rachel, and allowed her to enter the next floor only if she promised to kill Bam. Going back to the present, It turns out that Hidon, Coffee Man, and Hwarun were all working together all this time in order to isolate Bam, as we discover that Bam is actually alive. Lee Ro smells all this bullshit and decides to quit working on the test floor to find the truth. At the end, we see Hwarun reaching out to a confused and betrayed Bam, claiming that following her up the tower will allow him to seek the truth.